I'm a psychologist. My client has magical thinking. Literally. Jody appeared one afternoon, a walk-in client. I was in the office completing notes and had no appointments planned for after. But I don't usually accept walk-ins. I like to have reviewed a client's intake form and made preparations before their appointments. Jody barged past my receptionist and into my office, brown eyes blazing with determination. "You cannot turn me down, you have to see me," was all she said. I stuttered, surprised, then agreed, as if that were the most natural thing in the world. Shabarois? She didn't wait for me to complete my usual spiel reserved for first sessions. Confidentiality, expectations, that sort of thing. She cut through my practiced words. "I need to know how to control my thoughts." "Oh," I said, a little miffed. I wondered if interrupting others was a common thing with her. You mean you want to learn to change your thoughts, make them more helpful, adaptive?" "Oh?" She frowned. "Yes, I need to not have any harmful thoughts at all," she said once. "I see. I understand how frustrating negative thoughts are. It makes sense that you want to get rid of them. But the thing is, it is natural to have all kinds of thoughts. Painful thoughts, happy thoughts." "Exactly. Now, that won't do. I can't have any bad thoughts, not for more than a second or two. I need to learn to change them all as quickly as possible to good thoughts, or to only have good thoughts." It seemed interrupting was a trend with her. "So that's the solution," said Robin. "It's not possible to only have good thoughts," I said. "We're all—" "Oh, you're useless," she groaned. That stung. "Well," I said, regulating a sour surge of resentment, "why is it so important for you to not have any bad thoughts at all? That's rather all or nothing an approach, don't you think?" "I know how it sounds, okay? I've tried everything. I've distracted myself, I've recited mantras, I've blasted positive affirmations on repeat. I've done it all," she vented in a rush. I had an idea of what her issue was. "Have you also tried to negate the bad thoughts, like imagine them being destroyed, wiped away? Do you use any rituals to nullify bad thoughts, like the mantras you speak about, praying or thinking good thoughts to replace them?" She nodded vigorously. "Yes, I repeat a happy mantra until the bad thought goes away. Sometimes I hit my head hard to stop the thought. Then I repeat the happy mantra. Then I think good thoughts until the bad thought has passed." I smiled. "What are you afraid will happen if you have a bad thought without chasing it away?" "The bad thought comes true. Bad things happen. I've failed before, many times. People have, no matter how much I'm so tired," she said, her voice breaking. She swiped the sleeve of her sweater across her cheek roughly, but more tears came. "Jody," I said as comfortingly as I could, "what that is magical thinking. Magical thinking is when someone believes their thoughts can influence reality. This makes them police their thoughts, which leads to obsessive-compulsive." "No, you don't understand. My thoughts do influence reality," Jody cried. Her tears had formed rivulets that ran down her cheeks. "I know it feels that way. It can feel so scary, Look, how did I get this appointment? Your receptionist said you don't accept walk-ins, that I'd have to book an appointment for a later date," Jody snapped impatiently. I blinked. "Well, I happened to... You looked like you needed help." "Oh? And other clients don't? Have you ever made an exception to this rule?" She crossed her arms and stared defiantly at me. No, but this is a special case. This is..." I trailed off. Why did I make this exception? I hadn't known anything about her situation. She hadn't mentioned anything high risk or urgent when she had barged in. It's because I willed it so. I imagined you accepting the appointment. I imagined you being unable to say no to me," Jody said. Elmore snorted. "Well, that's rather..." I was struggling to find a better way to say far-fetched, but once again she interrupted me. "How did you know my name?" I raised my brows and my mouth hung open, unable to find an answer. How did I know her name? "I pictured you," Knowing my name, my age, I thought it such that you wouldn't make me go through any paperwork. I gaped at her, still silent. I could not explain any of those things, and why I had neglected all those processes. I didn't even get her signed consent for therapy. Signed consent. Let's start with the treatment itself, I said, drawing out the word and giving her a chance to answer. Exercise? It'll save us some time, she said, and screwed her eyes shut. Your receptionist is going to go home now, she said. Knock at my door. My receptionist poked his head in. I'm sorry to interrupt, he said in a panic, but I've got to go home. I left the gas stove on, I just remembered. Without another word, he turned and left. My jaw hung wide open, and I didn't bother closing it. See? I think things to life. Now do you understand why it is so important for me to only think positive thoughts? I felt a strange pressure around my neck, like a pair of invisible hands had clamped around it. The unseen hands squeezed harder. I grabbed at my neck, head swiveling frantically from side to side. Then the pressure disappeared, and I gasped for air, choking a little. I'm sorry, Jodi's face was pale, and her fists were clenched tight. I just had a brief thought about strangling you and… Oh! The pressure returned, and I clawed at my neck. Jodi hit herself on the head, hard, and the pressure dissipated once again. I'm sorry. She shut her eyes and chanted furiously under her breath. I could make out the repeated words after a few moments. All is well. All will be well. These prayers worked as we walked through the shadowy recesses of the temple. I stared at her in horror, my hands still around my neck, tensing against any sudden pressure that might come. Grace finally faced me, her slight figure with one of her comic eyes, her high cheekbones rendering her features approaching beauty. The deep crease between her brows eased after a minute. A feeling of wellness washed over me, like sunshine across a frozen landscape. I'm sorry, she said again. The feeling of peace, did you? She nodded. I found my words failing me. My gobs were smacked. How was I going to help her? What could I possibly do? My fear rose with these thoughts. Could you just imagine me being relaxed, composed, like me being just completely chill, on the ball, unflustered? I finally asked. The tension in Jodi's face softened a little, and she gave me a small smile before shutting her eyes again. There it was. I was completely calm, cool-headed, confident that I would be able to help, however wild the situation was. I had been through some crazy times, after all. Thank you, Jodi, I said, my voice steady. I considered the situation with a sudden clarity of mind. Now we can't do exposure work. Usually, I would ask clients to think those negative thoughts, think them hard, to prove that they don't hold weight in reality, that their thoughts can't affect reality. But for you, exposures are no-go. I leaned forward and ignored Jodi as she hit her head again and began to chant her mantra. And she loved this habit. There was no intervention manual for this situation, but there must be a logical way to approach things. When did this begin? I asked. When did you first notice your thoughts could affect reality? She stopped mid-chant, her brows furrowed. She swallowed and hesitated. I was in danger. I wished really hard to be saved. And I was… I nodded. This was fascinating. Tell me more about that. She shook her head vehemently. I could tell from the set of her jaw that there was no point probing. Okay, that's fine. When was this? About a year ago. A year. A whole year of dealing with magical thoughts. It was a miracle she hadn't gone insane. How did you cope this whole year? It wasn't that bad at the start. The thoughts only rarely came true, but time passed, and the thoughts got more powerful. Pretty soon, almost every thought had an effect, unless I subdued it, thought of something else fast enough. End note. That's gotta suck. A whole year of this? I didn't bother with professional verbiage. Her eyes moistened again, and I hurriedly redirected her attention. I didn't want her thoughts to get dark. So what was going on in your life just before it began? Ring a T. I don't know. I was in uni and… She shrugged helplessly. Did anything out of the ordinary happen? Anything that sticks out? She bit her lip, frowning. Then she shook her head. I really can't think of anything. Have there been times since your thoughts became more powerful when you haven't managed to manifest them? Haven't had them come true no matter how hard you were thinking it? Brian smiled. She thought hard again. Oh, well, there was that time when I hoped to win the lottery. Another time when I was in a bad place and wished for the world to end. Here she looked away, shamefaced. And there was once I tried to will all the neighborhood cats to come to me and let me rub their bellies. Nothing happened. Huh? Anything else? A darkness haunted her eyes, and she fixed her stare on the ground. Okay, fixed. I also can't will things back to life. Something in her tone sent an icy jolt down my spine. I wanted to ask more, but something stopped me. Was it her, willing me not to ask? Standing beside me, Juliet touched the wrinkles in my face. Her hand wound between my legs. I moved on with the questions. And these incidents, were there any similarities in the situations? Like what went through your head exactly? What were you doing? Who you were with? Things like that. It took a long time, but we figured out a few similarities. Jody had been alone those times. She had had doubts and had been unable to fully believe in the power of her thoughts. She had been on her balcony. She had also been wearing an obsidian pendant at those times. All right then, experiment time. I began writing on the whiteboard. Thought experiment, I wrote. Variable 1, I said, writing at the same time, alone or with others. Variable 2, not fully believing in your ability to make thoughts come true, or fully believing. Variable 3, being on the balcony, or being elsewhere. Variable 4, wearing obsidian pendant, or not. I stood back and looked at the factors. It could also be a combination of things, but let's test them separately first. Jody stared at the board, nodding vigorously. There was hope in her eyes. Exact. Alone or with others, that we can do now. Come on, think a neutral thought. Like? That my coffee is still warm, I said, pointing to my cooled coffee. She scrunched up her face. I touched the coffee cup after half a minute. It was warm, getting almost hot. Okay, it works. That's yup. I barely stopped myself from saying, badass. Now, I continued, I'll leave the room, go all the way down to the lobby, and you cool the coffee down, okay? I'll head right up. Take about, say, 3 minutes in total. She nodded, grinning. I left the office, made my way to the first floor, counted off a minute or so, then made my way back. 3 minutes, almost on the dot. I walked in and touched my coffee cup. It was cold. It was mid-morning and the sun was rising over the city. Right, so not the aloneness factor. Variable 2 then. What thoughts do you think you won't be able to fully believe in? Jody shrugged. Imagining an earthquake, I guess. I have never manifested anything on a large scale, or even medium scale. Now, I continued, I'll leave the room, go all the way down to the lobby, and you cool the coffee down, okay? I'll head right up, take about, say, 3 minutes in total. Izas. She nodded, grinning. I left the office, made my way to the first floor, counted off a minute or so, then made my way back. 3 minutes, almost on the dot. I walked in and touched my coffee cup. It was cold. Right, so not the aloneness factor. Variable 2 then. What thoughts do you think you won't be able to fully believe in? Jody shrugged. Imagining an earthquake, I guess. I have never manifested anything on a large scale, or even medium scale. I nodded. An earthquake? I doubted she could manifest something that big, however hard she tried. Go ahead then. She hesitated, then closed her eyes. I waited. I realized I hadn't set enough parameters in place. How long would I wait for? Where would the earthquake be? Hang on. I pulled up my search engine. I was halfway through typing the search terms for current earthquakes when I heard a low rumble. I stared at Jody in alarm. She seemed not to have noticed. She was still deep in focus. The floor began to vibrate, like a train was speeding by directly overhead. Jody? I said. The dangling lights of my office were beginning to sway. Jody? I said again, fear sharpening and magnifying my voice. Jody shook her head, then hit it. The vibrations stopped. Okay, I said. Not the scale of it or how much you believe in it. I was strangely calm. I wondered if Jody was still the source of my calm, or if I had given up worrying or panicking. Performance depression, I said, showing her again. Jody nodded, eyes wide. I can't believe I did that, she squealed, face flushed with excitement. How much? Very cool, very, very cool. Now next, I said, logically realizing how terrifying her powers were and how much danger the world was in should things get out of control. Yet, I felt nothing but assuredness. Jody was pulling the strings of my emotions, I decided. Variable 3, we would have to go to your balcony. We've already ascertained that your thoughts work here, away from your balcony. Let's go. We made our way to her house, where there was no one home. I thought them away, she said. Before I could be alarmed, she continued, sent my parents to the supermarket. I nodded. It's just your parents and you? A veil of despair draped across her face. It is. Now, I opened my mouth to ask about it, but found that I could not speak. I swallowed the terror that arose with my wordless exhales. We made our way to her balcony. She looked expectantly at me. Now think about something. Tell me what it is, I said, relieved to find my voice had returned. Nen. She pursed her lips and cocked her head. Maybe I'll imagine the flowers wilting, she said, pointing to the pots of plants lining her balcony. Sure, I sat down on a seat and waited. The flowers wilted, then came back to life at her mental commands. She seemed stunned and strangely upset at the flowers' revival. They can come back to life. I could do it. Then why didn't any of them? She trailed off. She looked broken. The last variable, I said, suddenly feeling a desperate need to move things along, to change the subject, probably Jody again. The obsidian pendant. Go get it. Wear it. I hoped it was the right variable, that we didn't miss any other similarities. She came back out soon, the pendant on a chain around her neck. It was a circular stone with a spiral carved into it. It looked like a vortex of sorts. Go ahead, think of something, I instructed. She looked around, then she looked at me, a strange smile on her face. I felt unnerved. What are you thinking of? She shushed me and focused. Do you see it? She asked after a while. See what? I asked. Her face fell, then brightened. This is it, this pendant, she yelped. I imagined you having the thought of a pink dolphin. You didn't get that? I shook my head mutely. I didn't like her continued efforts to mess with my head, but I was also excited because her thought didn't come true. Do something else to confirm it. Just don't mess with my head, I added for good measure. Head to the wall with a squeaky voice. I'll turn the walls blue, she said, pointing to the cream-colored wall. She thought hard and long, but nothing happened. Oh my God, it is the pendant, she cheered. I grinned. The pendant that blocked her powers. It was inexplicable. How did you get this? I asked, when she had calmed down somewhat. I bought it from some lady in a roadside stall in Peru, I think? Peru, okay. Wow, I was thinking of the different mystical beliefs I knew of that surrounded Peru. Well, we've got it. Keep this on forever, I said. How? She frowned. Forever? What if I lose it? Or if it doesn't go with my outfit? Nearly rolled my eyes, but she had a point. She couldn't ensure she would always have it by her side and never ever lose it. I thought for a while. How about we do exposure therapy with the pendant on? I asked. Huh? She stared at me, uncomprehending. Slowly, exposure therapy helps lessen the significance we place on our thoughts. If you keep thinking bad thoughts as hard as possible while wearing the pendant, it could normalize having bad thoughts for you. Thinking bad thoughts and having nothing happen could help you assign less importance to the thoughts. Okay, she said dubiously. The more significance we place on certain thoughts, the more they harass us. For example, the more I tell you that it's forbidden, even deadly, to think of pink dolphins, the more you would think of it. And the more you think of it, the more fearful you'd get, the more weight it would hold, and the more control it would have over you. So let's do exposure work, so that even if you were to lose the pendant, negative thoughts wouldn't be as scary for you. They wouldn't carry as much weight, but it may be easier to let them go before they do harm. You're right, she said, nodding slowly. That would be helpful. So, weekly sessions, twice a week? It would need to be frequent. I won't be by your side all the time, so it would also be important for you to do exposure work even outside of sessions. Otherwise, 1-2 hours a week wouldn't be enough to, If I have you by my side 24/7, that would be best, right? She asked, her eyes darting to mine and away. Yes, but I'm not able to, Jody, what's going on? What are you doing? I yelled, as objects around me began to grow in size. It took me a while to realize that it wasn't the world expanding around me, but me shrinking. Don't worry, her voice boomed, almost shattering my eardrums. I held my hands to my ears. Her giant face frowned, then she spoke again at a bearable volume. Sorry, it's not too loud now, right? She asked. What? What the hell are you doing? I yelled. Your voice sounds so cute, she said, giggling. I can't take you seriously. Let me adjust that too. She concentrated again. The voice began to move, shaking the table and outside clothing, and she was able to see. Jody, stop it. Whatever you're doing, turn me back to normal. Now. She shook her head. I need someone by my side to help me stay sane, to keep me from destroying the world, from hurting more people. I need to learn to control my thoughts. I need you here. I tried to protest, to shout, to rave at her, but I couldn't. I felt a sudden sense of acceptance and defeat. Okay, I found myself saying. Don't worry, I've got a beautiful dollhouse that you would fit in just great. I'll get you food, drinks, clothes, anything you need. I have my clients to think of, was all I could say. I'll get you a mini laptop. I can think one up. I'll let it have Wi-Fi. You can talk to your clients anytime you want, online. I was quiet as she picked me up and placed me on the palm of her hand. She took steps, and the world leapt by in swathes. Just please promise me, I finally found my voice, to not mess with my head. Please, let me still be me. Please, yours. She bit her lip. I already did, but okay, no further. Unless you try to escape, or if you don't cooperate. There is absolutely nothing you can do for the people here, notwithstanding your absence. This is your last chance. I nodded. It's been 10 months. I've been living in a dollhouse, completely alone, save for Jody's company. I've tried yelling for help when her parents came into her room to clean, but they saw nothing, heard nothing. Not a single person in my life reached out. Jody said she had taken care of it, that they wouldn't miss me. That was all she was willing to tell me, and I couldn't contact them. Every time I tried, I ended up doing something else, the attempt entirely forgotten. Jody must have done that too. I'm a bit cloudy and breezy at the moment. It's natural to feel discouraged when you're going through something difficult. I'm going insane. I don't think I can last much longer. Maybe I should ask her to mess with my head, to help make things tolerable. Mental health problems can be tricky. I know this from experience. Going out in groups, putting things that are failing to remove my depression into the sky, reducing their temperature. I've just had an exhausting exposure session with her. She thought bad thoughts for more than an hour, wearing her obsidian pendant. She's asleep now. It's a habit of hers now to place the obsidian pendant in the room next to mine in my dollhouse. This time, she had carelessly placed it in the wrong place, right in my bedroom, blocking my path to my bed. I stared at it, wondering how I could shove it aside so I could sleep in my comfy dollhouse bed. I blinked and rubbed my eyes. A bolt of adrenaline shot through my system. I stared at the crack on the obsidian, the crack that was not there before. The crack deepened and widened.